Welcome to the In-Tune Guitar Academy. Today we have a special guest, the same guest that we've had before, Mike Drolet. He's an Olympic class mountain bike judge, and just recently he won an award for being the best mountain bike judge last year, 2021. So congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, what does that award mean to you?
It's always good to be recognized by your peers. This award was, there's two kinds of awards that you get when you're in sport. You get the one that's specific to your sport, or you get the one that's all sports combined. A couple of years ago, I won for International Official of the Year, all sports combined. This one is national level. So basically the Canadian Cycling Association gives out the award to the International Commissionaire of the Year, but it involves all of the cycling disciplines. So amongst road, track, para, cyclocross, BMX, mountain bike. And so I was chosen as the International Commissionaire of the Year for all those disciplines, but it's in cycling. It's within cycling.
And how do you get judged for this award? Is it peer-based?
Yeah, it's peer-based because there's a committee that is formed of officials, and then they go over all of the candidacies and look at what you did over the past 15 months, the levels of the assignments. But it's not just about going to races, it's also about, are you involved? So do you sit on committees? Do you give training? Do you do mentorship? All that stuff is all part of it too. And of course I did all of those. I gave an elite national mountain bike commissaire course online for 60 people all over the world back in November, mentored another person to become an international, went to a World Cup, went to the Olympics. So, you know, I kind of ticked all the boxes, including being on the officials committee until that ended in November. And I decided not to continue because I wanted to focus elsewhere. So I was also on a committee. So all that combined, right, is how they decide who gets the award. There's also a national. So there's a national and then there's an international. And the person who won the national prize for the year is the guy that I was mentoring to become an international. So it was kind of cool. It worked out really neat because he's worked really hard, and he just got his international designation. It was confirmed in November. So, yeah.
You were just mentioning that the person that you were mentoring he didn't win an award, he just became...
Well, both.
Okay.
So I won for International Cycling Official of the Year in Canada, and he won for National Cycling Official of the Year because he sits on a bunch of committees. He's involved in Quebec, the Quebec Federation, because each province has their own federation. That goes up to the national one, and he's the development manager now. So he's taking care of the whole path that commissaires need to do training-wise and coaches and all that kind of stuff. Plus, he just got his international designation for cyclocross. Okay. And that, like, I helped him through that. I mentored him on a whole bunch of stuff, and it helped him to achieve it. So
is it like a ballot-based? Do your peers send in ballots to nominate the top?
Oh, I think it's the you get nominated by your provincial federation, and then the committee makes the decision. The committee's 6 different officials from all the different disciplines, and yeah, so it's that committee that decides who gets the award, along with the staff of Canadian Cycling. So
from our last interview, I think your 2 highlights would have been obviously the Tokyo Olympics.
Yep.
And then you were also mentioning snowshoe and
snowshoe World Cup. Yep.
Yeah. So those are your 2 highlights. Anything else that you'd like to mention?
Well, teaching the elite national course online. So it was the first time the UCI came to me and said, do you think we can put together, because there's levels, right? Provincial, national, elite national, then international. You have to go through all those steps to get to the top level of officiating. And because we couldn't get people into a single location because of obviously there's a little thing called the pandemic going on right now. And we decided to try and do one online. So we built the whole course from the ground up, myself and a colleague in New Zealand, and we delivered that to 60 people online over the course of 4 weeks, moving through the middle of November to the middle of December. And doing that was a highlight too, because converting what would be in-person training into online proved to be quite challenging. So, but we got it done. I don't necessarily think we're going to keep doing it that way moving forward, but in a world where we needed to get more elite national qualified people because they need to be elite national for 2 years before they can do the international course. We did that in 2021, and we're planning the next international course in 23. So a highlight for me is that the UCI still comes to me for this type of thing, and I'm kind of leading that whole process to get people qualified to become international, which also means that I'll probably be teaching that course in 2023, which is fun. The World Cycling Center in Switzerland for 11 days is never a bad thing. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But since you're trying to teach people from around the world, wouldn't online training make more sense anyway?
It does in terms of logistics, but it doesn't in terms of the learning, because officiating at a mountain bike race, unlike some other sports, it depends on the sport, but mountain biking is excessively hands-on. So, and a lot of it has to do with dealing with major stakeholders once you get up to the international level. It's not so much about knowing the rules by heart as it is knowing how to deal with people and understanding the different elements that come together during a mountain bike race that need to be managed. And it's really difficult to do that online. Plus, when you're communicating online, you lose everything to do with body language. They were looking at a video of me. I didn't see a video of them. You lose body language. You only get a certain amount of tone, and language issues can be one as well. It's hard for me to understand that the official in Germany who has a working knowledge of English is not understanding what I'm doing when I'm not sitting in the same room. So that's why the in-person thing is never going to be replaced. And unlike when we do an in-person course, where we often, we aim to pass 2/3 of the course. We don't bell curve, but it usually works out that way. In the online one, using the same type of testing methods, we only passed 1/3 of the course. And we figure that that's normal, because without that interaction, without the hands-on, it's very difficult to get things done. So it was a good thing for logistics. It's not such a good thing for the actual learning and internalizing the things that we need them to, because once you get to that level, it's more about interpersonal and understanding large moving pieces than it is about knowing the rules, right?
But moving forward, maybe you could do some type of
hybrid, yes.
So that way they get prepared.
Exactly.
Getting to
Yes.
I think most training is going to end up happening that way. All the experience that the entire world has gone through with the COVID.
Yep.
I think now, in-person meetings will still be important, but we'll start to realize that we don't need nearly as many.
Agreed.
And
yes.
we can do sort of hybrid.
Yes. Yes. But I think that the hybridization of that for becoming a mountain bike official is going to happen at the national level, where the UCI is just now starting to impose their structure and their vision of what a national commissaire should be on the national federations, where we used to let the national federations do things their own way. That's the level where a hybrid version, or even a fully online one that brings in the basic notions that we feel once you get to the higher level are the most important, so that once you get to that elite national level, the leap from where you were as a national to elite national is not so big. Because that's what we're discovering, is that leaving the national federations to set their own standards as to what constitutes a national official is really random right now. You know, Canada, with a lot of good structure, a lot of events, a lot of international events, our national commissaires in Canada get the level of experience that in some countries you don't get until you do international, because you never see the events. So I agree with you, but I don't think it's at that elite national. But anyways, you know, it's a very wide-ranging debate, and it's also about how adults learn. Online is a certain thing, but in-person learning styles, personality types, there's all sorts of stuff that come into play, especially once you get to the level where you're not just applying rules, you're managing a process and people. So yeah.
Online learning is not for everybody. That's
exactly, yeah. We already knew who was going to pass right from the beginning.
Not really.
After the first session, we could have easily said these 6 or 7 are going to pass, these other ones are going to struggle, and all the rest of these are not, just based on how they interacted with us in the online platform. It was clear as day. We had maybe 1 or 2 surprises. Everybody else was just we knew who was going to pass, right? Which is not so much the case when you're in person, because the body language and you can overcome more language difficulties when you're in person. Anyways, we digress, but yeah.
So just a question about the award and what it means to you. I haven't won a whole lot of awards in my life, so I'd just like to get the perspective of somebody who's won awards. And what does that award mean to you personally?
As an official in a very visible sport, cycling in general is one of the top sports in the world. Even when you go to the Olympics, the road races and all that kind of stuff, World Cup, Tour de France, everybody's heard about it. The officials are in the background, so it's never about us. It's always about the riders, the teams, the race and everything. So I think one of the things that I like about when you get an award like this is that for a very short period and with the right people, it becomes about us. So that's it feels good for the ego, but on a much deeper level, I've invested so much time and effort into becoming the best mountain bike official I could be since 1993. It'll be in a year, I'll be in my 30th season as a mountain bike official. So in many ways, it's justification for the amount of effort that I've put into it over the years. And that, as a human being, it's one thing to put a lot of effort into something, but if it never pays off beyond your own personal satisfaction, if there's never any objective external validation that what you're doing is good, it feels a little empty. So winning a couple of awards over the past few years, and along with other recognition that you get that's a little less formal, it's kind of a justification that what I consider to be my life's work has been justified, valued, worthwhile. So yeah, excellent. That, in terms of how I feel about it, but don't talk about that very much because, again, it's not about us.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think you should be really proud of winning that type of award, to be recognized amongst peers from around the world.
Thank you.
So we were discussing before we started the video, we were talking about equipment and how it relates to cycling. And the same could be said for a lot of different endeavors, whether you're talking about golf or skiing or cycling or guitar.
Or music and music equipment, yeah.
So, and you came up with an interesting analogy. So you were talking about why spend the $250 on a cheap starter guitar without mentioning any names, when you could just invest a little bit more and make your learning journey that much more satisfying.
Exactly.
So expand on that a bit.
Well, the same thing applies to cycling, is that your abilities are not going to improve because your equipment is better, not in the short term. But what you are going to be doing is, if you invest in the first level of equipment that's considered, I'll use the word serious, if you get to the first level of serious equipment, it's going to make the abilities you have more effective quicker, and then you're going to see your improvement is going to be quicker. Obviously, diminishing returns. There's a sweet spot, and we talked about guitars. If you're spending $700-800 on a guitar versus $250, and guitars better than I do, you're probably getting, well, that's probably the first level that. The touch is going to be good. It's going to stay in tune, and the pickups are good, the tone's good, all that kind of stuff. It's the same. I'm a drummer, as everybody knows. Frank's a guitarist. I'm a drummer. He's also an excellent bass player, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
But the groove he has. But that's not the subject today. But the first drum set I bought, I spent $250 on it, and it included the drums. It included some cheap cymbals. It included some cheap hardware, so the stands and all that kind of stuff. And even though you would think the stands of a drum kit don't have a big impact on how it's played, the reality is that it's huge, huge. Because with drums, because you're basically doing the work of 4 people, and that's not me trying to say drummers are extraordinary, it's just that if you look at the history of drumming, there used to be one person for the snare, one person for the bass drum, one person for the cymbals. If you think about a marching band, for example, and all of that has been combined into one kit, and one person plays it. How you position things becomes exceedingly important. It's just incredibly important, so that your trunk stays fixed and you can reach everything when you're playing. Becomes extremely important. So the cheaper drum kits make it really difficult to do that. So you figure out pretty quickly that that $250 drum kit is not going to allow you to get better quicker, and it may even develop bad habits because things are not where they need to be.
And the money that you thought you were saving, you end up spending anyways.
Oh, yeah.
You're constantly upgrading your starter
Exactly.
kit, and then you end up trading that in, and you'll lose the money as soon as you sell a second-hand
Yes, exactly.
instrument.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a false economy.
Exactly. And sometimes people will not invest a lot because they figure, well, I'm going to try it first and I'm not sure I'm going to get into it. I would submit to you that going to the first level of serious is a better investment, because when you do resell it, you're going to get more of that money back than you will on the cheap one that nobody's going to want. Because anybody who learns anything about how things work, nobody wants the cheap stuff. It just doesn't work.
But on the other side of the coin, you can take it to extremes. Like
Absolutely.
I know somebody's bought a Gibson Les Paul for $6,000, and it's a beautiful guitar. It's a piece of art.
Yeah.
But there's no way I would ever spend that kind of money, because I'm a working musician.
Exactly.
And I wouldn't want to bring a $6,000 piece of equipment on stage, because if it gets broken or stolen, that's a bigger loss.
Exactly.
Than losing my $1,000 guitar that could easily
And it's
be replaced.
the law of diminishing returns, is that does the $6,000 guitar really make you enough better to justify the difference with spending maybe $2,000, which is when you're getting into that mid-level of serious for guitars. Once you're spending $1,200, $1,500, $2,000 on a guitar, you can get a really good, for example, we've talked about Fender. You can get a really good Stratocaster, American built, for what, $1,200?
Well, no, the American ones, it depends on the level, depends on the pickups.
Yeah.
The American ones usually start around $1,500,
Okay.
up to around $3,000. I've seen them as the Fender Strat, you can spend $7,000, $8,000. Those are the ones with the brand names, like famous guitarists signed it, and it becomes...
They don't make it sound better, though.
No.
It's like drums. People buy these drum kits.
Sheer marketing.
And they buy these really fancy drum kits, but once it's a maple shell or a birch shell or whatever it is you're buying, what you put on the outside of it to make it look good doesn't change the sound. So once you spent $600, $800 on the shells for drums, you've pretty much, there's not really much else you're going to do. Because in any case, every drum kit that you buy is not going to have... It's not going to have the good skins on it anyways. So it's like buying a guitar, you're immediately going to change the strings it came with. Well, when you buy a drum kit, you're immediately going to change the skins, because the skins that they come with are garbage. So why spend $2,500, $3,000 on a set of drum shells unless it's vanity? You just want it to look good, but it doesn't change the sound. Anyways, we digress on that point, but yeah, it's once you get to that first level of serious, that's when the equipment no longer becomes an impediment and it helps you to get better. So spending more on your equipment is not what some people say, oh yeah, you spent a lot of money on your equipment because you're not actually any good at playing. Well, no, I spent more money on the equipment because it's going to help me get better quicker, because I'm not fighting the equipment anymore. And that brings us to what we were talking about.
The cycling.
Exactly. Same thing.
Just to your point about the guitars, I own two Fender guitars. I own three Fender guitars. One's made in China. It's an acoustic. I've had it for 12 years. I love it. It's a great guitar. It's not the best. It's not a Taylor. It's not a Martin.
Right.
I'm very happy with it. It suits my needs. I have a Fender Strat made in Mexico, and I have a Fender P-Bass made in Mexico as well. I love the Mexican guitars. To me, they're just fine. And both are around $1,000 each. So, I mean, the American-made stuff is great, but the Mexican stuff does have a Fender name, and
it's not a big enough difference that you see it. It's like when I bought my drum kit, I ended up buying a kit by a company called Crush. Crush was formed by a bunch of people that left the other guys, like be it Ludwig or Tama or Pearl or one of these, and they decided they were going to start a company to make drum kits that sound good, but that don't worry about the looks, so that they become affordable.
Drum kits for the masses.
Exactly. So my Crush, it's a birch, which means that it has a lot of overtones. It's really good for playing jazz and all kinds of music. It's great for rock too. But the way that it's designed, or the way that it's decorated, is just black. There's none of that fancy. It's just black.
No tortoiseshell.
But It sounds amazing.
It does.
And it only costs $600, including 2 really good cymbal stands, because one of the things I said about positioning, many of the cheaper drum kits, the toms, those the ones that you hit on top, they are mounted on the bass drum. And what happens then is that, well, you're stuck, because wherever you put your leg to be centered with the bass drum, that's where your toms are going to be, and they're no longer centered. So the Crush went to that first level of good stuff, where now the toms are mounted on the cymbal stands, so now you're free. You can have your bass drum where you want it, right where your foot goes naturally, and then you can bring the toms into the middle because they're sitting on cymbal stands, not on top of the bass drum. And that, to me, is the first level of serious when you're looking at a drum kit. And it's best to spend the $600 to get that rather than the $250 to get the cheap kit where everything sits on top of the bass drum, because it's the hardware that's expensive, right?
So relate that back to cycling. I know you were telling me that there's 3 basic things that you should spend a lot of money on.
Yes.
And those are?
Well, a lot of money is relative, of course. Okay. The very first thing you want to do when you buy a bike is you want to get the first level of serious, which is a term you've heard me use a few times.